Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Gopijana Vallabha Hari Yasoda Nandana Brajana Ranjana Yasoda Jamunati Ravana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Vishnu Paramatma Rajagacharya Sada Sisvade AC Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Namachar Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Paramsagaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shastri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopida Shama Kunda Radha Kudda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Gang Jamuna Tulasi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Go Premanandi All glories to assemble devotees All glories to assemble devotees All glories to assemble devotees All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga All glories to Srila Prabhupada Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Buddhaya Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachadane Vishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 11 chapter 2 verse 27 Tat Rochamana Swarucha Brahma Putro Pamam Nava Papracha Prasrayava Nato Nripaha Tan them Rochamana, glowing, Swarucha, by their own effulgence. Brahmaputra Upaman, just like the sons of Brahma. Nava, 9, Papracha, he asked, Paramaprita, transcendentally overjoyed, Prasraya, with humility, Avanata, bowed down, Nirpa, the king. Translation: overwhelmed by transcendental joy, the king humbly bowed his head and then proceeded to question the 9 sages. These 9 great souls glowed with their own effulgence and thus appeared equal to the 4 Kumaras, the sons of Lord Brahma. Report: Srila Sridhar Swami has pointed out that the word Svarucha indicates that the 9 Navayogandras glowed from their own spiritual effulgence and not due to their ornaments or any other cause. The Supreme Soul, Lord Krishna, is the original source of all light. His brilliantly glowing body is the source of the all-pervading Brahmajyoti, the immeasurable spiritual light that is the resting place of innumerable universes. Yasya Prabhavato Jagad Andakoti. The individual soul being part and parcel, the Lord is also self-effulgent. In fact, everything in the kingdom of God is self-effulgent as described in Bhagavad Gita. Na tadbhasyate suryo na sasanko na pavakaha yadgatva na nivartante tadhama paramamama. It has already been described in many places that the Navayogandras are pure devotees of the Lord. Being completely Krishna-conscious souls, they naturally radiated the intense effulgence of the soul, as indicated here by the word Svarucha. Srila Sridhar Swami has also pointed out that the word Brahma Putropaman means equal to the sons of Brahma, indicating that the Navayogendras were on the same spiritual platform as the 4 exalted Kumara brothers. It has been described in the 4th canto that Maharaj Prithu received the 4 Kumaras with great love and reverence, and here King Nimi is similarly receiving the 9 sons of Lord Rishabhadev. Receiving exalted Vaishnavas with love and reverence is standard spiritual etiquette for those who desire progress and happiness in life. Translation: overwhelmed by transcendental joy, the king humbly bowed his head and then proceeded to question the 9 sages. These 9 great souls glowed with their own effulgence and thus appeared equal to the 4 Kumaras, the sons of Lord Brahma. So here we have the introductory description before we have the questions and answers of the great sages. We often see that knowledge is transmitted in the scriptures through questions and answers, not only in the Bhagavatam, but we'll find in the Upanishads also. Somebody asks a question and they get answered, question, answer. In this way, they get their knowledge. And this, of course, is natural because previously there were no books. So where do you get a Bhagavatam from in Lord Chaitanya's time? Well, you could get a copy, somebody copied it out in a palm leaf and like that, but they were not readily available for everyone. And previous to that, there was even less available. And another point is that if it's the Vedas, even that is more inaccessible. And only the most elite are able to study that. So then most of the knowledge was carried on orally. So one had to approach a person to get knowledge. And then they would speak the knowledge if they judged you to be qualified for that knowledge. So there was some restriction on the knowledge. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that this Rajaguhyam,
This is the king of all secrets, which means it's not for everybody. It's very rare. It's not secret in the sense that the Lord wants to hide it or deprive people of knowledge, but people are unable to understand it or appreciate it. In that sense, it's secret. Even if they read it, they won't understand it. So a lot of knowledge is like that, and therefore in the Bhagavatam 11th canto, Krishna says, I like to speak indirectly. I don't always say things explicitly. Just do bhakti, everyone surrender. He won't say that. He'll say other things as well. Because not all people are capable of absorbing that message. So he speaks indirectly in many cases. And people can get their own message out of that as well. So therefore, the knowledge was carried on in an oral tradition. So the guru would speak to the qualified person, and the person would take that knowledge and he would accept it. So there was also a process by which one would accept that knowledge. So that is indicated here by the description where the king, he asks questions. He asked a question here. And what was his qualification? He was very, very pleased with these 9 sages, and he had a humble attitude. He bowed his head, avanata, prasraya, very, very obedient. So he had a proper attitude. So this attitude of the qualification of the disciple is also mentioned, for instance, in Bhagavad Gita, where it says pranipata. So pat means to fall down. Pat, like patanti, patita pavana, pat, fall down. So nipat, pat is to fall, ni is to fall down, and pra is to fall down extremely. So one has to, not physically, of course, you can do that also, physically offer your respects by doing dandavats, etc. But in terms of attitude, also one must be very, very humble in order to get knowledge. So that is indicated here, where the king, even though he's a king, he is bowing his head and being very humble in front of the sages. So a very important quality of a person to receive knowledge, he has to have humility, which means that he understands he doesn't know anything. If we think we know everything, how are we going to absorb any knowledge? How are we going to get any instruction if we think we know already? So a person who is proud means he is proud of everything about himself, and therefore he doesn't have to accept the advice of anyone. So then not giving him knowledge would be of no use at all. So if a devotee sees such a person, then he will not speak the knowledge to him. He's not qualified for the knowledge. So therefore this type of attitude of humility is very necessary. But of course, we can see all sorts of humble people. They're not necessarily qualified also. So one has to have a desire for that particular knowledge. In this case, of course, it is spiritual knowledge, because the Navayogendra's speciality is spiritual knowledge. They're considered to be as like the sons of Brahma, the Kumaras, who are Shaktavesh avatars of the Lord, shining with their own effulgence. So they're full of knowledge, and spiritual knowledge. So one approaches such a person for spiritual knowledge, not for other knowledge. So therefore they have to ask the right questions. So if we have the Navayogendras come, and then we were eager to meet them and we're very humble, and then we ask them a question, how am I going to start a business? Then that's not the proper question to ask. Or who should I marry? Or all these questions. This is not the proper question you should ask the Navayogendras or any spiritually elevated person. So one should be inquisitive, as Bhagavad Gita says, pariprashnena, with thorough questioning, but thorough questioning about the right question. You have to ask the right questions, not the wrong questions. So therefore, the king here had the right attitude. He was inquisitive, and he was inquisitive about spiritual knowledge. So previously there was a whole list of all the questions. What is the highest good for humanity? Such questions. Who were the avatars and the different yugas? So all spiritual questions. So he was very qualified. So not only one has to be humble, but one has to have desire to know about spiritual life. And therefore that is reflected by the inquisitive attitude. We ask questions to the person. So that is very, very important also. In Bhagavad Gita, then it also mentions a third qualification, and that is seva, service. We see that as also an important element, though we may not see how that is related to knowledge, but we see it is always illustrated. So we see the case of Krishna Balaram in the ashram of Sandipani Muni. So the famous story is they would go out and collect firewood for the sacrificial fires every day. That was their service. It was menial type of service. So they did, in spite of the fact that Krishna Balaram are the Supreme Lord, they followed the whole process and they were carrying the wood, etc. And of course in the Vedic literature itself it says Samit Pani, Sotriyam Brahma Nishta. So Samit Pani means with firewood in one's hand, one approaches the guru and then asks for knowledge or whatever like that. So from the Vedic times, the idea of service was also necessary as a qualification for the disciple, which again indicates the humility of the person, but a willingness to try to please the guru. It has another aspect, of course, that service is that one is willing to follow all the instructions and not reject some if we don't like them, and to implement them. So a lot of the knowledge we get is not just theoretical knowledge, it is practical knowledge. We have theoretical knowledge, we call that sambandha gyan, the philosophical aspects of our spiritual knowledge. But then we have the practical aspect, abhideya, what we're supposed to do to attain the goal, prayojana. So therefore we have to act upon that, and we have to follow the instructions and implement bhakti in our life. So that is follow the instructions of Guru. We have to do something, not just learn something, we have to do something practically. So that is seva. In other words, that is following the instructions of the Guru. We have to implement and serve in that way. So if we don't do that, then the instructions actually are useless. The whole of spiritual knowledge consists of sambandha, abhideya, and prayojana. So ultimately, one has to attain the goal. If we don't attain the goal, we're not successful. To attain the goal, we have to follow the process. If we don't follow the process, we don't get the goal. So the sambandha is the basic knowledge which will help us understand what is the goal and what is the process. The philosophical knowledge of distinguishing jiva from Supreme Lord and matter, etc. So everything is necessary, but if we don't attain the goal, then it's all useless again. If you go to school and study but you don't get your degree, again, useless. Nobody recognizes you, so you can't get a job. So we have to also attain the goal. To do that, we have to follow the process. So we have to do seva, follow the instructions properly. Then it's not a waste of time. So those elements are very necessary in a person. It's qualification for getting knowledge. So here we find that the king was actually a good student because he was inquisitive, he was humble, etc., whatever. And of course, the person we approach also has to be qualified. They do have to have some knowledge according to Scripture. They shouldn't speak all concoctions. So at least they have a solid grounding in Scripture. Yeah? And they should have some devotion, and some steadiness, and some proper achar, etc. So there has to be qualification on the part of the teacher or the guru also. So that we see is emphasized also in the scriptures, even the Upanishads. So they talk about being Brahmanishta, fixed in Brahman, which of course can have impersonal interpretation, fixed in Brahmajyoti, or Brahman meaning Supreme Lord. So we're fixed in worshiping the Supreme Lord. Of course, we can take that to high level and say that it means actually directly seeing the Supreme Lord. So that's prema. So that we can say is the ideal guru. But at least there has to be some minimum qualification of the person to speak properly about the subject matter, in this case, devotion. So the Navayogendras here were qualified also, so it is said that they were like the sons of Brahma, the Kumaras. Of course, we could also say, like Narada Muni, he's also a son of Brahma. Here it says Kumaras, but it could be like even the Narada, who is incarnation of empowered with bhakti. So it is stated here that they were highly qualified, and even though they were the sons of Rishabha, who was coming from Manu in a Kshatriya line, they attained this qualification of being great sages. So qualified like the Kumaras even. And it further describes that they shone by their own effulgence, self-effulgent. So sometimes we see pictures, even in the Western world, we have Christ with a big halo glowing around his head or whatever like this. And in India also we see that even in the movies, we'll see the crown around the head with all the jewels on it or whatever, like a halo, whatever. So of course that comes from, all this derives from actual effulgence. So a very powerful person will have a certain effulgence to them, which we may not be able to see with our normal eyes, but some people can see. So, in other words, it should be derived spiritually, because the Atma has been activated. There's a different Shakti in the body. Normally the Atma is covered. We have the material body, the gross body, and the subtle body, and all of the karma and all these material things, so we don't see anything of the nature of the soul. But one who's got at least realization of Atma, then he's free of all these coverings, so it's different. And if one has attained higher realization, not only of Atma, but of Supreme Lord, then even more effulgent. So the word self-effulgent is used in relation to Atma or the Supreme Lord. Svaprakasha is often the word used, self-illuminating, because in the material world most things depend on another thing to get revealed. So to see objects we need light. It's a dark room, we cannot see the tulsi plant, we need the light. So our vision of forms is dependent on light. Now, of course, we do have fireflies, they have their own light, so they're self-effulgent in some sense. And then we have the sun is self-effulgent also, or the stars, or the moon. So they're considered to be self-effulgent in some sense in the material world. Of course, ultimately, Krishna says the I give them the power to light, so they're not really independent, but in the material world, light itself is considered to be self-manifesting. It reveals itself. The candle flame does not need a candle flame in order to be visible. It reveals its own form. Yeah? Even a small flame, it doesn't need the sun in order to be revealed. So even that type of light is, say, self-revealing or self-effulgent. So that's as far as material world is concerned. Light is very mysterious, but the analogy is carried over into spiritual things. So the Atma is said to be self-effulgent, svaprakasha, because it is conscious. And a conscious entity doesn't need another conscious entity to reveal it. It's aware of itself. It doesn't require somebody else to say, okay, you're conscious. So the individual has his own awareness and his own ability to be conscious of other things. So in this sense, he is svaprakasha. But we also know that even that is relative, because this nature of the jiva to have consciousness and be aware, etc., is coming from the power of the Supreme Lord. He cannot do anything on his own. So ultimately, the Supreme Lord is svaprakasha. He is self-illuminating. And because of him, then the soul has self-effulgence. And because of that, the light in the material world, the sun and the moon, have their power to give off light. So that is why Krishna says, I am the source of all the lights and whatever, the sun and the moon and the stars, etc. So ultimately, the real swaprakash, or self-revealing nature, is in the Supreme Lord himself. So he is aware of himself, he is aware of other things, and he causes other things to have awareness, like the jiva can be aware. So he's ultimately the swaprakash entity. So this word is often used in relation to spiritual things, either the jiva or the Supreme Lord, to distinguish it from matter. There is a difference between the self-revelation of a candlelight or a flame and a jiva. The candle flame can reveal its form, and it can also enlighten other forms, so give light to other forms. But it's not aware of itself. It cannot reveal itself in the sense of being aware of itself. So that's the particular nature of the jiva. He's also aware, I exist. So the candle flame cannot say, I exist. So he has self-awareness, aware of himself. So in that sense, there's a difference, because there is a sense of I and a revelation of the I, which does not take place in the candle flame, but can take place in the jiva or in the Supreme Lord. So that distinguishes conscious entities from unconscious things like flames or lights in the material world. So anyway, the jiva has his own swaprakash nature, but it's not revealed under normal cases. But if he becomes spiritually realized, either with self-realization or God-realization, then this nature manifests quite nicely, and it can surpass the material body and coverings, and therefore we will get this idea of the effulgence of the things which may be perceptible to some people even. The spiritual nature of that person becomes apparent even by looking at them or whatever. So in this way, the Navayogendras were highly qualified because they had reached a high level of realization. In other words, they were free from the restrictions of material bodies. The bodies were no longer a covering over their spiritual qualities and the spiritual nature. So thus highly qualified, and therefore the king approached them for knowledge. So when we have both the person with the knowledge and we have the qualified person to accept the knowledge, then we get the exchange of knowledge. If the person asking the knowledge is not qualified, then the other person won't speak. or they won't give them the final knowledge. They may give them a little bit of something, but not the final knowledge, so they won't get the full knowledge. If the person we're asking doesn't have the knowledge, then whatever he gives also is imperfect and of no value. So if we get qualified persons on both sides, then we get the exchange of knowledge. So these qualifications are often emphasized in the scripture because there should be an exchange of proper knowledge, but it has to be done in the proper way. So we have an indication in this verse of that when we see the qualification of the Navyogendras and the qualification of the king explicitly mentioned here. Okay.
Well, you say that speaker and the listener both must be qualified. But in Kali Yuga, it's completely opposite. Neither the listeners, because we are all dealing with normal people. But Mahaprabhu has made a different way. We can apply this particular thing.
Yeah. Well, of course, we can say maybe the qualifications were higher in the Vedic age because the Vedic knowledge is even more, let's say, elevated or whatever, restricted, more restricted. But in any case, even if it's Kali Yuga and even if it's the process of Bhakti and Harinam, etc., still there has to be qualification. So we say you don't preach to the faithless people. So the faithless person is unqualified. So we don't preach to him, otherwise it's an offense. So that we have to see some qualification in the person. So the qualification is, of course, at least not offensive or whatever like that, or not opposed to the Lord, not hostile to the Lord. If they're neutral or a little bit favorable, fine. If they have faith, even better. Then we can say something to them. So that's as far as teaching is concerned. Holy name, of course, you don't have to teach and it has effect. So therefore people can hear the name, even if they're apparatis, even if they don't have faith. So in that sense we can spread the holy name everywhere. But if we want to give instruction, as the Guru does, then we have to see some sort of minimum qualification. And then the process works. Otherwise they will reject the knowledge, it'll be a waste of time. But there's some qualification necessary for instruction. As far as holy name is concerned, no restriction, they can all hear it. So that's the benediction for Kali Yuga. People can advance spiritually just without instruction even, but hearing the name.
Also, this is like in the month of marathon, devotees have been distributing books in thousands, Bhagavad Gita. But we are not sure that those who buy the Gita will read it. They may keep it in Almira and just lying down for many years, but somebody may read.
Yeah. Well,
Because
if they're going to take the book and pay some money, at least they have some favorability. They're not opposed to it. So in that sense, even that is a good beginning for them. So if you even you touch the book, or you see the picture of Krishna on the front, or you utter one verse of it, that's also good for you. Of course, if you actually read it and understand it, it's even better, but they can get some benefit from it. And even if they don't get benefit, somebody else may get the benefit of it also. So there's always some, like say, beneficial result in terms of bhakti for the person who gets the book.
You said that faith is the basic qualification for getting instruction from the Guru. But that is the basic qualification. From there on, how the disciple keeps improving this qualification. There are some more other qualities also required for improvement and attaining the goal.
Well, with faith, then we start the process of bhakti. And the process of bhakti is one of its qualities is subhada. It bestows all good qualities. So with the practice of bhakti, one should develop all good qualities, and all bad qualities will be destroyed. That's kleshagni, destruction of all suffering. So simultaneously within sadhana bhakti, the bad qualities will get destroyed and good qualities will manifest. So whatever is necessary for spiritual advancement will also manifest through sincere practice of bhakti.
Even the BTG is a Krishna Surya is one Maya Andhakar. That's the BTG logo itself. Wherever there is Krishna, there is no darkness. And we also see where Prabhupada many of them were attracted by Prabhupada, the effulgence itself, in the Western world and all that we can see.
Yeah.
They were just attracted by the
I
effulgence
mean,
of
in
Prabhupada.
terms of effulgence,
Yeah.
like the sun. Yes, of course.
Yeah. On the contrary, Maharaj, we also see like effulgence is, in one sense, is an external, and per se, Rishabhadev, he was in his last stage, he was just moving in the places, and people are throwing stones and all that. And there, I mean, the effulgence probably he did not show, but the effulgence on one side, as devotees, we don't consider the external; it's only the internal. So, how to understand that? Yeah,
Well,
effulgence,
to see the effulgence of a spiritual person, not everybody can see it. So that's why some people were throwing rocks at him. They thought he was a beggar, like that. And we also say that the Paramahamsa, the highest devotee in prema, one may not recognize. One may think he's just a beggar on the street, even. So we do have to have some qualification to recognize them also. And if we do recognize it, then perhaps we can see the effulgence or whatever like that as well. But there's some qualification even for that. Yeah? So that's why we have to be careful also that we don't disrespect anybody, because he may be disrespecting a highly elevated person and we don't know what he is because we can't see his spiritual effulgence. Okay? So there are external symptoms as well as internal things, of course, and a person on a lower level cannot appreciate those things. So sometimes it requires a person on an equal level to understand and to point out that person that he is spiritually elevated, and the person who's less qualified won't be able to do that. So that's why it's dangerous to judge those highly elevated souls.
Okay, Maharaj. Here we see out of devotion this effulgence is manifesting. There are cases where they are not spiritually oriented, devotionally oriented. With all respects, Shankaracharya, the old person who is no more now, Chandrasekhar. I mean, people are attracted to his effulgence again. He was very effulgent.
Is it effulgence or is this his fame? Publicity. Publicity or tradition. Often it is tradition. It's simply because he's the head of that thing and their family follows, they follow, and they revere for that reason. Yeah, whatever. They may have certain qualities, but not necessarily spiritual also, and they can attract people. People in the material world, they can attract so many people. Actors attract crowds, singers attract crowds, politicians attract crowds, Hitler attracted crowds. So there's various material techniques you can use to attract also. So it's not always spiritual, it can be material as well.
Again, in the beginning, Maharaj, like Parikshit, when he was looking at the cow and the bull and the Kali was attacking them, the face is the index of the mind. The face was completely dark.
Of what?
Of the cow which was lamenting at that stage.
Oh, the cow is dark. Yeah. So
That's why the faces is the index of the mind that's gently mentioned.
Yeah.
And there, here we are talking about the effulgence. There it's a dark because it was affected. It was lamenting a cow.
Yeah. Well, that's one aspect of the face, but we could say in general the whole body, in one sense, also can be an index as well. But of course, for most people, we can see that the face is it's easier to detect in the face because of expression, whatever. So it's easier to detect the feelings of a person by that.
Maharaj, is that on new moon day, sun is more effulgent?
What is that?
On new moon day, sun,
New
because
moon.
New moon day,
I
sun
don't
is
know. That's the
Because-
black moon.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maharaj, because we consider Purnima is full moon day is auspicious, whereas the local Sampradaya, they consider new moon day is very auspicious to start anything. This is exactly opposite. How to understand?
Oh, well, I think maybe it's auspicious because the moon starts growing after that. So that's the waxing phase of the moon, the Sukla Paksha. So it's good to do things in the Sukla Paksha. After the new moon, then the moon begins to increase. So that's the good phase of the moon. So that's why they would start on that day, because it starts to increase the moon.
Sometimes when you go to Kumbh Mela, we meet some sadhus. Even though they may have matted hair, we can see some charm in their eyes. And maybe sadhana also makes a person look more better.
Well, because they're developing some sort of, if they're doing proper yoga or whatever, then they've developed some sort of level of realization of Atma apart from the body. So therefore, yes, they will have some sort of Shakti, spiritual Shakti also.
It says pavitra. The mental purity exhibits in external. But sometimes we see a man's face long, brooded, and we ask him, what happened to you? But if you see our Prabhupada always smiling, and that's what many devotees told. I met Prabhupada, he looked very young. He always looked young.
Maharaj, usually when we talk about menial service, we understand that service which no one wants to do, like washing pots or cleaning the floor or something like that. But at the same time, we also understand that menial service does not always indicate humility, isn't it? Because someone doing menial service may also be proud that, see, I'm the most menial servant here, I'm the most humblest over here.
Of course, yeah. It's not an absolute standard, but generally the proud person wouldn't want to do it. And then if he was doing it, then he would do it to show off, so he would have to have people to look at him first to see that he was doing it like that. So, we could say doing service in humility means that we do it without desire for recognition or anything. Then it's something proper.
Raj, you mentioned about how the candle is illuminating other things, but it's not aware that it's illuminating.
Yeah.
And you said that's one difference with the jiva, that there's self-consciousness.
It reveals its form, it reveals other forms, but it's not aware of itself.
Yes. So I'm just wondering if there's so much talk these days, I wonder if you've given some thought about artificial intelligence. Because, they're discussing that this is just a whole nother level of capacity for thinking by machines, and even they're going to begin to think about, they're questioning, will they begin to have some self-identification? We can't even program their questions because they're thinking so far ahead of us now. And oftentimes people will say, well, there's no need for soul because we understand the brain's like a computer. So I'm wondering if you've given some thought, this new era of yet another level of Mayadanava's mysticism with artificial intelligence, of how, just any reflections on that and our response to people that would then say, well, it's just further proof there's no need for spiritual.
Well, I think they've contemplated that, and they have realized that no, there is no self-awareness there. It looks like it is, because the whole program to be arranged in such a way that it looks like it is, independently doing things and answering your questions in a very intelligent way, as if it is, getting your answers and thinking about them and then replying. But actually, it's all programmed in there. So actually, there is no awareness of that whatever machine, that I am a machine and I am doing this and whatever like that. That awareness isn't there. But the program can be such that it imitates the awareness of a person, and that's as far as they can go. So in that sense, it's not a real person.
But they say it's machine learning, because more you talk to it, it understands. And
so,
now their mind boggles that it's becoming very difficult to control them. In some places they're stopping it. Many governments are telling, don't do it. Tomorrow we may have a new generation of machines trying to control the humans.
Of course, they may develop some way of putting a little soul in there eventually. We don't know. By bad karma, a soul can get trapped in there and be the source of the consciousness for that, or whatever. Or the other thing is that they could develop a mechanism by which it is related to a person, and the person's consciousness then activates that thing to do all. So in other words, we can hook it up to a person, and the person can have like a computer intelligence. That's also possible. We still have the aware individual, but then he's got this extra thing with him with all the computer intelligence. So then he would be the Atma behind all the intelligence. That could be there in the future. Superhumans with a little computer attached to them.
Bhagavatam or other Vedic scriptures, we don't see this type of machines, circuits and semiconductors. Just like Mayadanava, the whole city is just moving like Karda Muni. But we don't see the internal mechanism.
Well, it's not mentioned, but they had very advanced techniques, because that, Salva's city machine was bigger than a city, and it was made out of some material that could not be pierced by any material object, and it could fly faster than anything we could see, and it could be here, and it could be there, and it could be there. It could be all over the place simultaneously almost. So it was some technique by which you could do it, but it's not mentioned what those things were. That's
Here we need petrol or gas to move.
Looks
Water
like not.
system, they don't have any other
Not
mover.
dependent on that at all. Something else, some other source of fuel.